If you've clicked on this video, I'm guessing you've seen at least one hand wrap tutorial in your time here on YouTube, but you may still be confused as to why we wrap our hands in different particular patterns. So I'm not only going to show you how to wrap your hands, but along the way, I'm going to explain how to do it properly and also why. So let's kick off by going over the main purpose of a boxing hand wrap. Number one, it is there to protect your hands and your wrists. But number two, which may not be as known to most people, especially those of you with stinky gloves, is that it actually protects your boxing gloves, just like a sock protects your shoe from sweat. And just like a good pair of socks, you also need a good pair of boxing wraps. So today I'll be using the Rival Guerrero hand wraps, which are 180 inches or about 4.5 meters. Anywhere between 4 and 5 meter hand wraps is perfectly fine for most adults. Anything smaller may be okay for, say, kids and teenagers. You also want to make sure that your hand wraps have plenty of elasticity, stretch. The Rival ones definitely have that. And if your Velcro's worn, the stretch is not there anymore and the hand wraps are basically falling apart, chuck them out and treat yourself to a new pair. And so with the purposes covered, the hand wraps themselves covered, let's go into the hand wrapping technique. So first things first, I'm going to use my thumb loop here on my thumb, and I'm going to then start by wrapping over my wrist right at the base 3 times. Make sure that every time you pull your hand wrap, you always try and take a little bit of the slack out. That way you're adding a little bit more compression and a little bit more stability. This section here is essentially going to be my starting point, and it'll also become a little bit of an anchor as well. So that way, if I add a bit of bulk to this section, it's going to be a lot easier for the boxing glove to close over my wrist. Secondly, I'm going to move on to my thumb. Here's where some tutorials, sometimes I feel, get it wrong. If you're going to wrap your thumb, I'm going to go over my thumb and back. And this is where I feel that people sometimes get it wrong. And what I'm saying by that is, if I pull down towards my wrist when I am crossing over my thumb, see how it is pulling away from the hand? Ideally, I want my fist as comfortable as possible. So instead, all I'm gonna do is bring it up towards my knuckles. That way, my thumb is naturally pulling towards my hand instead. From there, what we're gonna do is create our knuckle pad. I'm basically gonna wrap over my knuckles 3 times, more towards the ends of my knuckles here. What that's going to do is it's going to add a tiny bit of bulk to my knuckles. It's going to prevent as much scuffing as possible with the inside of my glove, and it's also going to create a little palm pillow on the inside. So the reason I go over the front of knuckles a little bit more is to ensure that when the next section that we're about to go over pulls this knuckle pad into place, that the pad doesn't shift over the back of my knuckles, therefore doesn't really help me at all. The next step we're going to take is the figure 8s or the X's. Essentially what these movements do is it's going to be the most important part of stabilizing my wrist, my hand, and securing the knuckle pad to my fist. So from here, all I'm going to do is move back down to the wrist. From there, I'm going to wrap over once, and I'm going to start at my pinky finger. I'm going to squeeze each time I do this, work my way back to the index finger and thumb. Now I've created my figure X. From there, my figure 8. From there, I'm going to wrap over my wrist to the next finger. Same thing again, little squeeze to really get that pad and that finger nice and secure for the strap. Back to the wrist again, up towards the very last finger in between my index and middle finger, back around. Now from here is where it gets interesting. You may have a little bit more or a little bit less wrap remaining. If that is the case, you can add a little bit more bulk towards your wrist, or we can add more to the knuckle pad. Either way, customizing this a little bit will help, especially if your hands or your wrists are slightly different sizes. Once your wrist strap is complete, have a look, make sure it's feeling okay, that it's not too tight or too loose. Obviously, if it's too tight, you will lose the feeling in your hand. If it is too loose, this will obviously come off during training, which can be a nightmare. So you want to make sure that everything here is nice and secure. I've obviously got a really nice palm pillow here. My knuckles have a good amount of padding on it. Most importantly, it is nice and stable. I can make a fist really comfortably, and as you can see, it's a little difficult for me to deviate or flex my hand in any motion, which is what you want. You want your wrap to assist you in trying to keep that fist nice and stable. And if you do punch in correctly, that the wrap is there to help with some of that shock absorption. So that, my friends, is exactly how I wrap my hands and also why I wrap my hands in this particular style. I'd just like to remind you that this is of course a guide. It is not a rule book. You may definitely find a better method out there on YouTube. However, try and make sure you keep these basics in mind. Good quality wraps and obviously a good quality pair of boxing gloves. If you like this so if you enjoyed this tutorial, guys, leave a like, subscribe, and remember to hit that notification bell so you can see all of my upcoming content. And if you had any questions, please leave them down below and I'll do my very best to get back to you as quickly as possible. So I hope that helps you wrap better and protect your hands a little more. I'll see you guys soon.